Aside of that, you need to know exactly that your judge is going to also be, well, of someone who actually has a working brain, or a brain that you want to have be working.
Yeah. So we really want our judges to have impulse control, right? Just because they just take a disliking to the look of your suit, you don't want them to convict you on it. But if they had a brain injury, they might well not have that kind of inhibition control.
You're listening to the Philosopher's Arms with me, Matthew Sweet. Free beer is an illusion, but is free will. This is what we've come down the pub to discuss. We've seen that it's relatively easy to manipulate a decision that appears to be free. Now I'm going to become the battleground myself, this idea. Schopenhauer said, man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. We're going to put that to the test now with Peter Mabbott, who's been quietly propping up the bar here. Peter, you're a hypnotherapist.
That's right.
Tell me what that involves.
My role is to help people make changes to their lives through the use of hypnosis, this mythical thing that we call the trance state, that everyone seems to think is something that we've created as hypnotherapists, but it's not. All we're using is a naturally occurring state of mind that absolutely everyone experiences every day of their lives.
And are you influencing people's free will? Are you taking away their free will?
No, the whole idea is to give back people control in their lives. So, in other words, where they perceive they don't have the willpower to change, my role is to help guide them to come to an understanding that they actually do have that choice.
Can we put this to the test?
Yes, we can.
Shall we swap places?
We shall.
OK. Let me just say, before I sit down in this chair, that I don't take responsibility for anything that happens.
All I'd like you to do is to just place both your hands flat on your thighs, both feet flat on the floor, and to close your eyes. And just with your eyes comfortably closed, just want you to become aware of your breathing. Just noticing the air as in a few moments, you're going to hear me count down from 10 to 1. 4. Deeper and deeper still. And 1. And all the way deep down. Relaxed. Staying deeply relaxed shortly, I'll be waking you. And when I do, you'll become fully wide awake, but an interesting thing will have happened. You'll have totally forgotten about the letter G. Totally forget the letter G. 3, waking up. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, opening your eyes. 9, 10, wide awake, and welcome back.
Well, and here I am.
Here you are indeed. How did you find that?
Well, that's nice to have a bit of time off, isn't it? I felt like I was really having to work quite hard to feel relaxed in this context, because I was very aware that there were lots of people in the room. I could hear, the odd chairs creaking, perhaps the sound of people trying to suppress their laughter.
I want to try a little experiment with you. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to recite the alphabet for me, please.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I so wanted not to say G there.
You could hear the hesitation there. Why did you say it?
I had no sensation of having really forgotten it. I was trying to forget, desperately trying to forget it. My eldest daughter's first name begins with G, so maybe if it had been a different letter, it might have vanished from my mind. I'll tell you what I was quite aware of was there was a kind of contract between us in a strange sort of way that I really wanted to fulfill. But I would have felt, if I'd not said G, I would have felt like I was faking it.
And that's what I wouldn't want you to do, because what this demonstrates to me is that even though, we've met before, we've talked, I didn't know your daughter's name, and if I had known it, I perhaps wouldn't have chosen that letter. But it demonstrates to me that you still had that free will, that volition to be able to either go along with it and genuinely forget, or to do what you did, which was to say, well, actually, I wanted to, but I can still remember it.
To psychoanalyse myself, as soon as you said G, I saw my daughter, and I thought actually to forget that G would have been a betrayal of her. Perfect. So my loyalties to her are more, thankfully, more powerful than they are to you. So do you make a distinction between free will and willpower?
We have the choice, we have free will to be able to choose, I feel, the route we take in life. Sometimes we get programmed into a particular set of behaviours. Sometimes we let the pleasure centres of the brain dictate what we're doing, the way we interact with the world. So, for example, somebody who perhaps learns to eat in order to suppress emotion, they're pandering to the feeling of pleasure that comes from the pleasure centres within the brain. It's pushing aside the executive functioning of the brain that makes a lot of the decisions, well, I'm going to do this or I'm going to choose not to do that. Within hypnotherapy, what we help people to do is to get back in contact with that executive functioning aspect. So even though I'm helping somebody to achieve something that they want to achieve, ultimately it's their own choice if they wish to achieve it. All I can do is open up options for them, help them to strengthen a desire to change, and give them that free will to go down one route or to go down the other route.
Gemma, what's the neuroscientist's position on willpower? Does this seem to be a separate phenomenon to free will?
If executive function is synonymous with the concept of free will, which I consider it is, it doesn't matter whether it's conscious or not conscious. The fact of the matter is they are the decision-making centres of the brain. But then it comes down to whose fault is it if just the way mine's wired up due to past experience is different to the way yours is wired up, and therefore your executive function has far more control over your pleasure centres than mine does. But it all comes down to the way that your dopaminergic system is wired to be addicted to, for example, to nicotine, but not to alcohol, and vice versa. So it's very easy for some people to give up cigarettes, but impossible to give up alcohol.
So, Wayne, is there any room in philosophy for a separate idea of willpower?
Harry Frankfurt in the 1970s wrote a very influential paper. Frankfurt's starting point is this idea, look, we have lots of desires. I want to have a cigarette, but I also want to quit smoking, right? He calls those first-order desires. But then I also have higher-order desires. And my higher-order desires is, which of those do I want to be effective in moving me to actually act, right? And so Frankfurt analyzes free will and the concept of being a person as really having effective control over one's first-order desires. So I both want to quit smoking and I want to have that cigarette. To be a free person is to have sufficient discipline over oneself that I can decide which of those desires is actually going to lead to action.
You might have been dimly aware of a low, steady, crunching sound, the noise of the barroom philosophers here munching their way through Gladys's complimentary crisps and nuts. She gets the special philosophical flavours in, smoky Roger Bacon. Now, did anybody very consciously not eat the crisps and nuts? Can we get the mic to you, Joe? Tell us about your attitude to these nuts. I see them in front of you. You haven't touched one. There are crisps here too.
No, I haven't touched them. I am a Weight Watchers success story currently. I have lost 3.5 stone. So, thank you.
So does this feel like a case of exercising free will?
Not so much with the crisps and the nuts, but definitely I've got a very lovely work colleague who makes the most amazing cupcakes. Now, when she brings them into department meetings, that is a massive case of having to, exercise my self-control and free will and use my willpower and so forth. So when she brings those in, it is, in my head, I want to be skinny. When we go to Weight Watchers, they ask you what your motivation for coming is. I'm a PE teacher at a secondary school. Through the whole journey, through the whole thing of losing all the weight, it has been, I will not be the one that is large in the PE department.
So are the social politics of it, if I can put it like that, important then? Is it about what goes on within a group?
I made a very conscious choice when I started Weight Watchers I went on Facebook and said, this is my starting weight, this is my goal weight, so that everybody knew that I was then trying to lose weight, because then you kind of feel that they're watching you. So yes, it does become a group thing. And for me, the biggest support has been the meetings on a Friday morning when we get weighed, because it creates this camaraderie, if you like, in that you are all in it together. You are all going through the same ups and downs and temptations, and And so being there on that Friday and listening to like advice and tips and how to succeed, it is that group support that is making you go forwards.
Does it feel like something that's slightly beyond you then? Like the group is exercising its will?
Yeah, it can do sometimes. Not all the time. But there are moments where, if you're thinking to cupcake or not to cupcake, where you kind of go, I have to go on Friday, and if I've put weight on, I have to admit to the cupcake. Then you're kind of not just letting yourself down, but like everybody else who's supporting you at the same time.
Yeah, I think that Joe's accounting there is a really good example of what Frankfurt has in mind. And there are three elements that I think Frankfurt would point to there. First of all, there's an ability of critical reflection. I thought about it, right, in advance. What kind of person do I want to be, right? Do I want to be the fat PE teacher, or I'm not going to be that? Then the second part of the package is effective control over one's first-order desires, right? I'm going to use that critical reflection to discipline my desires. I'm not just going to be pushed around by them. I'm going to take control of that as best I can. And then the third element is support from the community. That's the political dimension, really, of free will. It's in virtue of being in the right kinds of relationships that I'm able to exercise those kinds of controls. It's not all about the brain. Neuroscience is one of the great scientific developments of our time. But really, when it comes right down to it, it's about the relationships with other people. And you need to look at more than just the brain scan to find out if somebody's free. You need to know what kinds of relationships they're embedded in.
Sorry, philosophers, please.
Gladys has rung our bell. Before we all make our way out of here, where do we stand on free will at the end of this conversation, Gemma?
Well, for me, it's a matter of interpretation. We have a phenomenon called executive function that's able to suppress undesirable habits and urges as and when necessary, but the extent to which it can do so is not necessarily not predetermined, but it's predetermined at any given moment in time based on your past experience and your hardwired biology.
Wayne?
Well, I think it's worth thinking about how the Greeks managed without the concept of free will. They didn't just believe in fate. They operated with the notion of self-governance or autonomy, setting one's law for oneself. And the key thing is they thought it was really hard work. And you needed to be surrounded by the right kind of people and have the right kind of knowledge in order to attain to it. So it's a high aspiration for human beings.
Is it hard? Harder, perhaps, to win that freedom today?
It depends who you're surrounded by. If you're surrounded by neuromarketers or hypnotists, then you're going to need a lot of help from your friends in order to warn you about what's going on.
I've got to let you reply to that, Gemma.
At the end of the day, you know, our brains act as gatekeepers to this kind of manipulation, because if marketers sell you something that's a better experience than you've had before, you'll buy it. If not, you won't. And no amount of persuading will fool that massive supercomputer that is our subconscious.
I want to end by asking you a last question. After all you've heard tonight, how do you feel about your capacity for free will? Tap your glasses if you feel more free than you did at the beginning. Tap your glasses if you feel less free. So now you know you have no choice but to thank all our guests here in the Philosophers Arms. Gemma Calvert, Peter Mabbott, Wayne Martin and Joe Russell. Join us again next time for another textbook problem. Until then, please think responsibly.